Hello dear one, and welcome to this video on another perspective on depression. Now, just so that you know, I don't like to reference studies because I feel the objective view of I am separate from that which I'm observing is failing to see that the very observation itself is part of the determining factors of the results. The double slit theory in quantum physics showed this, where they pulsated electrons through a double slit and it changed once they put an observer there. Now, consciousness itself collapses a pure wave-like potential into one option particle in this physical plane. So when it comes to pharmaceutical drugs, both sides, the people doing the study and the people wanting to join the study, are both to some degree bullshitting each other, okay? Because in studies, poverty is answering these pretending calls so that they can be part of a study and make money. So they pretend to be depressed for the perks, and the company pretends to believe them so that they can get results for the study. Okay, but for those who beliefs are influenced and swayed by studies and need the evidence of scientific study to open up their mind in this form, I feel it's useful to somehow point out from that reference point to what a lot of studies have shown and yet have not been revealed to the public, or is buried under enormous amount of false studies, or the pharmaceutical industry hiding them or manipulating the data and analyzing the data in such a way where they are still prone to use SSRIs and SNRIs because it's beneficial for them. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry every year, so why wouldn't they want to prove that? Otherwise they lose that. Another thing why I don't like using studies, but just so that you know, is the p-value showing a less than 2% improvement is enough for them to put the tick and approve its benefit. This is less than what the placebo effect shows. The placebo effect is they get a sugar pill, they get absolutely nothing, and yet the story of it is so strong that they snap out of it. So depression can be seen in one study as a form of grief. Now, within this, they actually gave a grief exemption of saying if you lost someone, blah, 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 then you have grief, otherwise you have depression. And then they started questioning into that, and they actually removed that out of the studies and said that's no longer possible. We're just going to go ahead and not differentiate between grief and depression. Okay, and with pharmaceuticals, there's never just the tablet that they prescribe. There's the physiological effect, but then there's also the story around it, so it influences your belief. The placebo effect is how much do you believe that this can make you better. Now, from this, the exemption of grief that was taken out, to me was really surprising, because it means that it's influencing, and again, influencing the analysis of this data. Now, there's two types of depression: endogenous depression, which is the body malfunctioning, serotonin levels, all of those things being out of alignment, or the reactive depression. So this is the story and the belief we tell ourselves about ourselves and our past. Okay, so those two differentiations. Now, common symptom derealization is when you feel nothing you do is authentic and real. You feel completely disconnected to your authenticity. That was proven in another study and really talked about. You can look that up if you want. Being deeply lonely causes as much stress as being punched by a stranger. This is another study that was showed. Okay, super, super interesting though. And then also another study, what was called the Adverse Childhood Experience Study, which was the longest study done, showed that childhood trauma, depression, and depression as an adult is dose-respondent effective. It means that they didn't just find a correlation to the traumatic causes and the problems that children had, But for every category of traumatic experience you went through as a kid, you were radically more likely to become depressed as an adult. So if you experience 6 categories of trauma events in your childhood, then you are 5 times more likely to be depressed as an adult. If you experience 7 forms of traumatic categories as a child, guys, this really blew my mind. You were 3,100% more likely to commit suicide or attempt to commit suicide as an adult. So the greater the trauma, the greater the risk of depression and suicide. So it's dose respondent. And this, from that study, they called it the dose respondent effect. Okay, so there was a correlation to childhood trauma and depression. Not just the chemical imbalance in the mind, it goes deeper than that, doing the work. Now, the more unequal the society, the higher the mental diseases are. That was another study, and that was the consensus of that study. Let's go to the genes. 37% of genes-related depression, but it doesn't account for what's going on, okay? So there is a gene relation here. And geneticists, I might not pronounce his name correctly, but it was 𝗱𝗲𝗿𝐁𝐀. He did the most detailed study in genetics and depression for 25 years, and it was more than 1,000 kids. Which genes, and he asked which genes made you more vulnerable to depression. So he actually did find a gene. It was called 𝗱𝗲𝗿𝐺T, and this relates to being depressed, but the genes are activated by environmental circumstances. So having this gene and an experience that's very stressful on top of that gene, that's when the gene was activated. And that's when the likelihood of depression blooms and blossoms open, or hence childhood trauma. So these are just a couple of things that studies have shown regarding depression. And these studies came from really good sources, but as I said, I don't like looking at studies, but these studies also show that it's not just a chemical imbalance. It's not just going to be solved by taking a tablet and going on with the same routine, the same structures in your life. We have to stop and look inward at what is blocking us from just being here in this moment. What is making us trying to escape this moment? And if we are really going deeply inward, what we find there might be really traumatic. It might feel really uncomfortable. The title of the book that comes to mind is The Body Keeps Score. So even that which the mind doesn't remember, it's still in your fascia. It's still in your tissues, okay? You probably heard the saying that your issues are in your tissues. And normally this is why normal talk therapy does not help everybody. Some people naturally follow their innate wisdom to move when they want to move, to dance to a song when they want to dance to a song, or to be somatic, to release, to do all these things. But for someone with depression and with that low level of energy, barely getting out of bed, no motivation to do anything. And if you do have motivation and you get yourself in front of a therapist and you sit and you talk about it, you're being more in your mental realm. When you're more in your mental realm, you start overthinking that. And now, great, you have figured out that you have depression, or that you are experiencing depression. And through that figuring out, now you know that this is something that you have to deal with, but you still don't have any energy to do what's needed in order to deal with this. So talk therapy is great and it has a place. I have nothing bad to say about traditional talk therapy. But if that brought you to a place where you just recognized and realized what your, so to speak, problem is, if that's as far as you got, and you couldn't get any further, if that response, emotional response, is still there, and you feel helpless and you feel hopeless and it's not changing, then I really invite you into something like a somatic experience, to go through the maneuver method of working into your fascia, working into your connective tissue, because that is your highway or your Wi-Fi system of your energetics that's stored within your body. Involve the body, involve the voice, involve movement. So there's really 3 things I wish that they taught in school and that I've known to such a deep level since a child, because I do see children naturally doing this. And these 3 things, that is the inner alchemy of our body, is breath, movement, voice. Breath, movement, voice. Moving your body while breathing deeply, releasing through a sound, through a frequency, right? Energy is never created nor destroyed, but it can be transformed. And sometimes we complicate things to such a degree. Keep it simple. Come back to these 3 things: breath, movement, sound. Listen to your favorite song and start dancing and start moving. Shout if you have to. Release that pent-up energy that is causing the rivers of energy to become lakes and stagnant waters within your system. Because energy is really meant to move. And the only way that your waters get toxic is if they become stagnant. The only way that an emotion becomes toxic is if it becomes stuck and stagnant. So use these 3 things. And I do offer somatic experiences. I do offer integration therapy. So if that is something that you want to work on in a one-on-one session, or just however it is, you feel into what's best for you. But from my experience, being in talk therapy alone for a very long time did not really help me. It made me super consciously aware that there is a problem, but I didn't know how to address it. I didn't know how to claim back my power. Because depression is also a lot about putting your power outside of you, putting your power in the therapist, putting your power in the situation, putting your power in whoever gave you that experience as a child, or whoever did something wrong, or whoever blamed you or hurt you, or whatever it is. We disconnect from our inner operant power and we put that into something else. And in that way, when I say operant power too, I'm still referring to awareness. That is your operant power. This is why time and attention is our 2 most valuable assets that we have in this life. What are you paying attention to? That's the true energy. That's the true energy of this moment. So discover that. Because your awareness summons energy, summons power. So if you keep putting your energy onto the thoughts that feels depressed, on the situations in the past, comparison, all of these things, then that's what you are going to grow. Because the awareness and the attention summons power. So it is so useful and yet sometimes so difficult. You have to take responsibility and cut that power off to the things that you do not want. And you have to start concentrating on what you do want, on how you do want to feel. And it might feel absolutely impossible in the beginning because you haven't used those faculties and you haven't used your pleasure centers for such a long time. Start small. Be patient, 1 breath at a time. You are not alone. So reach out, find community, reconnect with yourself on all the levels. I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for being here. Like, subscribe, share with a friend, or just share your thoughts, share your intuitive contemplations around these videos. I appreciate you so much. Namaste, dear one.